Johannesburg's residents should brace themselves for a 58-hour water outage. Rainwater says the shutdown is very important, quite necessary to perform maintenance and repairs to its water line. So to unpack this even further, I'm now joined by the CEO of the SA Water Chamber, Benoit Le Roy, joins me this morning. And thank you so much, Benoit, for your time. Let's talk about why water outages seem to be increasing quite recently.
Morning, Tumelo, to you and your team and the listeners and the viewers. Yes, I was listening to some of the previous interviews, and there's a much bigger picture at play, and this is part of the bigger picture. The Water and Sanitation Master Plan that was published after a lot of public pressure in 2018, after being absent for a decade, showed then that there's an underinvestment gap of 900 billion rand in water and sanitation infrastructure. And what we're seeing in Johannesburg at the moment, and in many parts of the country, including eThekwini, Nelson Mandela Bay, and obviously outside the metros, are the symptoms of underinvestment over the last 2 to 2.5 decades. And what we're doing now is playing catch up, but at the expense of the economy and dignity of people. So this is the tip of the iceberg, literally on this cold day.
Yeah, and that's important to note, Benoit, because if there is a gap and there hasn't been, diligent maintenance work in terms of, research being conducted, investment into maintenance works, these are the ramifications we'll see, right? Water shutdowns. I've also heard the wording water shedding. But why do you think that has been the case? Why do you think these gaps kept on lurking when it comes to maintenance of water in South Africa?
I'll be very blunt. We have sweat our assets to death. So we had very good assets, we had very good planning. And what we've done is we saw that they were quite resilient. And it's taken 3 decades for them to start keeling over. Water assets require extremely highly competent people, more so than in energy, and not looking down at the energy folk, but there's this water energy nexus. And, the assets are very complex. They're very expensive, and they take 10 to 20 years to, in actual fact, rejuvenate, upgrade, plan for massive urbanization, which we haven't done. And part of this outage is to keep up with unplanned urbanization. And so one has to be in the water game. One has to think ahead, what's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years, not repair what we didn't do in the last 10 to 20 years. So water has to become a priority in our society. Energy is an on-off thing. Water is a slow onset disaster, so it takes a long time for it to raise its head. But when it does, it exponentially hits us. And this is what we're seeing with 15 to 16 million people in Gauteng suffering water shedding. And people don't like this word, but it is water shedding. Yeah. And we have a lot of foreign investors last week at a major conference who are really sitting on the fence because we need energy, we need reliable water security to invest. And they are prepared to invest, so we need to make water a bigger priority than what it is. We mustn't, roll over from crisis to crisis. We need to think ahead. We're entering the 5th industrial revolution, and using 2nd industrial revolution approaches that include the onset of cholera that we exterminated over 5 decades ago are really not healthy for society. I believe we can fix it, but it has to become a national priority and not talk. It has to be implemented.
Absolutely, and implemented with a sense of intentionality and urgency. But also when it comes to system designs, should they cater for tie-ins, do you think?
Well, we do that in all industry. And I think in the last couple of decades, we have erred somewhat because we weren't paying attention. So these are all preventable. And you cannot take, millions of people offline. Johannesburg has over 6.5 million people, and you're taking a third of the population offline for water for 1, 2, maybe up to 5 days. Who actually knows? You can't do that. So this just exposes our lack of planning foresight. And we have a skills deficit, and the globe is a small place, so we can get the skills overnight. That's not an issue, but it's really got to do with planning. And we really need the smartest scientists, accountants, engineers, technicians in the water sector in South African municipalities. We can't take average. We need the smartest people because it's a highly complex environment. And we're being thrown with the load shedding issue, which really topples over the broken water distribution system. And so there are solutions to this, but unfortunately, we're not seeing any movement. And you must look at water and energy together. We can't look at them separately. They are embedded in each other. And that's that nexus that we need to focus on. So it's one subject and not two subjects.
I'm going to come to your recommendations, Benoit, just in terms of what you think those solutions look like in at least, a summarized detail, if that makes sense. But before I get there, it seems the alternative that we always run to, and this is supposed to speak into your point around forward planning, is the water tankers. Number one, are they a sustainable alternative? And number two, Benoit, are they safe?
First, it's not sustainable, and it's really going back to first and second industrial revolution with at least they're not cart drawn. I'm not being facetious. It's really unsustainable, and it's become a new normal. So it's not. It's extremely expensive. It increases our carbon footprint. It's moving more traffic onto the roads, and it's unsafe because what we've seen with the cholera and Hammanskraal is, in all likelihood, people reacted far too slow, but in all likelihood, it was the tankers. And the tankers are just increasing the risk of getting parasites, pathogens, and dirt into the supply chain system that's normally sealed. So you're breaking the seal, so to speak. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to understand the provenance. So there should be a test and a certificate. Technology exists for every single tanker so that we can track from where it's gotten the water, what the water was like, who signed it off, and where it was delivered. And we do this for tracking, for example, hazardous waste, nuclear waste, and the likes. We do it for tracking our cars for anti-hijacking. The technology is there. So it's not an extra cost or anything like this. We are in the fifth industrial revolution. We can track sulfates. We can track these. And what we need to do is a laboratory information management system, which is called LIMS. It's a digital system, needs to be linked to these tankers and the provenance. Then we can reduce the risk of any ingress of any pathogens or bacteria that could cause harm.
I know that I'm about to, throw in a very broad question in there, asking you to summarize it for me because we're running out of time, unfortunately, Benoit. But moving forward, yes, forward planning, absolutely important. You mentioned, specialized skill. The smartest people that are industry experts need to be roped in. But moving forward then, after the skills have been secured, after the forward planning, how would you advise South Africa get out of its water crisis?
We need to think water and energy every day. We need to think what we're going to do about it. We need to budget accordingly. We need to hold our local and national governments accountable for providing these basic services that are taken for granted in most industrialized countries, and we are an industrialized country, so it has to become foremost. And we need to look, it's no use trying to do poverty alleviation if you don't have water and energy security. So this has to become the primary budgetary and item, but also we need to depoliticize these basic services so that the political processes that we see, especially at local government level, do not affect the basic services. So we need to depoliticize it. And we've seen that in Asia, in Europe and North America, it's highly depoliticized. So the interruptions are reduced. I think that's another thing we need to put in. But we as society have to drive this. As active citizenry, we have to make this a priority because nobody else is going to do it for us.
I appreciate you speaking to us about this very important matter, and also, speaking about how it can be possible. It is possible, but it takes, a mindset shift just in terms of making sure that we do plan forward and we're not so reactionary as a country. This might affect our economy, quite negatively. If investors are looking at a country that doesn't seem to have its energy or water, issues under control and it's more reactionary than forward planning, it seems that it might put us at a disadvantage. CEO of the SA Water Chamber, Benoit Le Roy, thank you so much for speaking to us.